whether it's a good or a service, every company makes a product. And you need capital and labor or inputs to make your product. And that's what we've been working on here is this. Here's our capital, here's our labor, and we have those two inputs, and we put those two together and we get some output. But from this production function, so that we have this equation. It's a mathematical equation, and just says, that just sort of shows the relationship between the capital and labor and the output. And so we need units of capital and units of labor to produce some good. But once we have that capital and labor, it costs money. So the cost function is just the use of this production function. So we have labor here, but we have a cost of labor. We have capital here, and we have the cost of capital. So we put the cost of labor, the cost of capital together, and we get our total cost. And that's, again, this is just review. And these are the equations we've used to fill in the tables and to answer a bunch of questions. And then once we have the Q, and we have the total cost, then we can solve for the average cost. And you could also put in here that once you have the total cost and the Q, you can also do the change in the total cost over the change in the quantity, and that gives you the marginal cost. So not only will you have questions about solving for these, but you'll have definitions. And just to give you a kind of a hint here, the average cost is going to end up telling you not only on average what does it cost per unit, but it also gives the company an idea of the lowest price they can charge. So on a question, for instance, on the table, you're going to use your table to answer the question of what's the lowest price the company can charge. And look at your sheet there. It says it on question, I think number 7 or something like that. It says what's the lowest price that this company can charge. And the answer to that question is you look at the minimum point of the average cost curve. So lowest price is the lowest average cost. And so that gives you that. And then the marginal cost, so the marginal cost helps to determine, not only the additional cost per unit, but it gives you, whether or not there should be an exchange made. So it tells you that information too, because if your marginal cost is above the money that you're going to bring in, you wouldn't make an exchange. So these give you this information that helps companies to make decisions on the cost side. All right, once we have the production function, what we've also done are these concepts called marginal productivity. And the marginal productivity, what happens is the company is trying to figure out if it's worth it to use more capital or more labor. So they look at their situation, and like for instance, there's a question on the quiz, I think, that talks about well, here I don't have it, but there's one on the test that talks about like toasters. And it would say if the company hires you, all right, but before they hire you, they make 32 toasters, and then they hire you and they make 39 toasters. So they look at you as an employee. Let's just say they start out with 100 employees and then they add you. So that would be your labor here. This is your labor and this is your output. So what the company's trying to do when they look at this marginal productivity is they'd say, all right, capital would be just something fixed number. And say, what happens when we add that one more employee? If we add that one more employee, what happens to output? In this case, they say that they're going to make 7 more toasters because they hired you. So they get an idea of what your value is by looking at your output. So what happens when you come to work for them? Is there a change in output? Yes. And it better be, right? If not, then what's the point of them hiring you? Because if this comes out to be negative, or if this comes out to be 0, then why hire you? And so the marginal product holds capital constant, and it's just, you put units in here, let's just say it's 10 and 10. It doesn't matter what the number is, it's held constant. And it looks at the change in labor and the change in output. And it helps them to determine a couple things. First of all, what you're worth. And then you can say, okay, how much are these toasters costing? So if a toaster cost, or what's the price of a toaster? So the price of the toaster is equal to, $25. Then the company could put a monetary value on you. So they'd say that, you're worth 7 toasters, and those 7 toasters cost $25. So that's called the marginal revenue product. And the marginal revenue product is just your price, your marginal product of labor times the price of the good. So it's 7 times 25. So to the company, you're worth $175. Now they're going to compare that to what they're actually paying you. So let's just say they're paying you this, this is by the day. And let's just say they're paying you $200 a day. Then are you worth it for them? No, why not? Because they're losing money. Because if they're paying you $200 and you're only bringing in $175, then it was a bad decision for them to hire you. Or maybe they could look at this beforehand and go, hey, we're not really sure how this worker is going to be, right? Because that happens sometimes when you come in to a company, they charge you, they pay you a little bit less. So they say, okay, what if we just pay, this worker $150? Was it a good move for them to hire you? That worker? Yeah, because they're making a little bit of money on you. So that's why companies are going to start you off a little bit lower, because they don't know what your productivity is going to be. And then once you prove that you're productive, it should be pretty early on, then that's the best time to really negotiate is early on. You don't want to go too long because you become, they think they have you. But then once you've proven yourself, it's a good time to go in and say, look, I know I'm productive. I know I'm worth $175 and you're only paying me $150. It may not be that specific, but you can say, I know I'm worth more than I'm being paid, and I'd like to, and if you're worth it, you're truly worth it, then they're going to probably pay you more. Okay, so that's how that would work, right? So that's the marginal product of labor, and then how it's used is to determine, whether a wage rate, an appropriate wage rate, and then they make the hiring decision based off of the information that we have here. So you're going to have a question on your test, something like this, okay? Something just like what I just went over. The marginal product of capital helps the company to determine whether or not they should use more capital units. So let's say that they went from 10 units of capital to 11. We're going to keep labor the same. So what happened here is I kept labor the same and I changed capital. And if that, let's just say, goes, it's 39 still. So is it a good idea for them to increase their capital from 10 to 11? In this example, yes or no? What does this story tell you here? What just happened? Right. Yeah, we had to pay for the capital, and we didn't get anything out of it. So why would we use that capital if we didn't even make anything out of it? So the companies do this. They look and see whether or not they should hire that extra worker, whether or not they should, buy that extra, lawnmower, all right, or whatever it is, the capital that they're using, and they see did it help output at all? Should they bring that new stapler? And if they do, and it adds the output, then fine, let's do it. But if not, then let's not do it. So that's the point of the marginals. Whenever you hear the word marginal, right, with marginal productivities, then you're looking at one thing changing. Either labor's changing and capital's held constant, or capital's changing and labor's held constant. So one of them is moving, and the other one's being held constant. And the reason that's good to do from a business perspective is they want to find out, what's the value of adding another unit, or even subtracting another unit. Companies do that too. They'll fire people and for the sake of firing. Okay, and did anything change? Look, I was at a company where they fired a whole division and nothing changed. During the recession, during the recession of 2008, there was a period of time where we, as a country, dropped 6 million workers. 6 million workers, and output didn't change. You think about that. 6 million people lose their job and we're still producing the same amount. So what does that tell you? Well, it tells you that the people who kept their jobs were scared, so they worked like doubly hard to try to keep their job, or it tells you that they laid off a lot of people that really weren't very productive. I'm not sure which the answer is, but you can see that matters, right? You know, from a company's standpoint. Okay, so the next thing in the new stuff, the new material, is this concept called returns to scale. And the difference between returns to scale and marginal productivity is, you can see when we did marginal productivity, we changed one thing at a time. We changed labor and held capital constant, or we changed capital and held labor constant. With returns to scale, we're changing both capital and labor. It would be like saying, you know, we built this, you know, McDonald's over here in front of Winthrop, and now we're going to build another McDonald's over here on, you know, right by 77, I-77. And so that's changing both capital and labor, because you're changing, you know, the actual structure. There's two different structures now. You can't have people working at the same place at the same time. So we need double the labor, double the capital, and that's what returns to scale evaluate, is what happens when you change both. And that's what we're going to look at here. So in my example, we have capital units and labor units. And to start with, you know, we need to figure out like how much each costs. So that has to be given to you in this example. All right? We'll say that capital is, you know, $10. Oh, sorry, not capital. Rental cost, capital is 10, and the wage rate is also equal to 10. So we have $10 for each of these items. Remember, our cost equation is right here. So we have total cost is equal to the rental cost of capital times capital, and the wage rate times the labor units. Okay, same formula as we use. So given this information here, what would be the total cost? Right? It's pretty easy, right? Because it's given to you. But we have wages times labor plus rental cost of capital times units of capital. So our total costs are 8. Everybody see that? All the information was given, so all you really have to do in this case is just plug the numbers. You don't have to solve anything. Is everybody okay with that? Yeah. Good? Okay, so now, remember what I said, we're going to change both capital and labor. So let's increase capital to 8 units, and let's increase labor to 8 units. So now we doubled capital and we doubled labor. We built that separate, you know, building right next door that looks exactly like our building. We built another bank on another corner. We built another McDonald's on another corner. We replicated our business somewhere else. Okay, another, you know, Zaxby's or Chick-fil-A or whatever. So we doubled it. Now the question is, what happens to output? So since we doubled this and doubled that, what happens to our output? So let's just assume that it also doubled. It does the same amount of business. What happens to total cost? It doubles too, right? And if you want to put the numbers in to solve for it, you can. But it's 10 times 8 and 10 times 8. So this is 80 plus 80. I get my 10 from here. My rate, my wages are 10. My labor is 8. My rental cost capital is 10, and my capital is 8. So that's where I come up with the 160. What's the average cost in this one? Yes?
40.
Huh?
40.
Well, 4. Just 4. 1 more. Yeah, it's going to be this 160 divided by 4. So 4. Okay? So what happened here is that everything doubled, capital doubled, output doubled, total cost doubled, average cost stayed the same. So this is called constant returns to scale. And the way that would look like graphically is we have this, we're going to look at the average cost curve. And we say that we have this one company here, let's call it a small company, and when they produce, the measure of their average cost here, their average costs are $4 when they produce 20 units. So I'm just taking this information here and I'm saying they're the minimum point of the average cost curve, kind of an assumption, but their average costs are 4 when they produce 20 units, so that would be right here. And what's their average cost when they produce 40 units? It's going to be 4 again. So if, let's say there's a bigger company and they have an average cost, so I'll say that's a large company, and their average costs are going to be 4 also. So what happens is when the company gets bigger, their average costs stay the same. Okay, and in this case, what happens is this gives you an idea of the companies and how they compete with each other. So in a constant cost industry, then bigger companies don't have an advantage over the smaller companies. Smaller companies don't have an advantage over the bigger companies. So what happens in this case is that any company can compete with any company. So they can get any size company in this industry. You have big companies, little companies, etc. All right? Anybody think of an example of that? You have a question?
What did you say constant returns to scale was?
In constant returns to scale,
Yeah, what did you say it was?
that's all it is when you double, when you, in this case, you double capital and you double labor, you double output. So when all those things are doubled, then when all these things are doubled, then that means it's constant. So, and again, the result of this is that any company can compete with any other company. So you got big companies and little companies in the same industry. So an example would probably be like restaurants, where you can have a mom and pop restaurant competing with like an Olive Garden or a Red Lobster. But those Red Lobsters and Olive Gardens that are grown by a company called Garden, and they're huge. But mom and pop restaurants are just owned by individuals, but they can compete against each other because their costs are very similar, right? You can't really decrease your cost by getting huge when it comes to restaurants. You don't get like bulk discounts. Does that make sense? And even if you did, you can't even you can't overbuy stuff because it has to be fresh. The quality of your restaurant goes down even if you do buying huge significant bulks. Okay, like McDonald's buys in bulk. Okay, and what happens to their quality? It's not great, right? Because they can't. In other words, if you go to the best restaurants, they're going to probably cost more because they're buying fresh every day. Okay, so my point is that anybody can compete with anybody in this industry. So if you have a big company, a little company, a ginormous company, right, that produced 80 units, and a lot bigger one, right, than XL, then it doesn't matter. They're all pretty equal in this industry. With this next one, what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, capital doubles, labor doubles, and output more than doubles. So in this example, the output goes from 20 to 80. So when they double in size, like with capital and labor, they actually more than doubled in output. And this is called economies of scale. And you guys are in the College of Business, you're going to hear about economies of scale a lot. And really what happens with economies of scale is that the costs are going to go down. So when the output goes up, the costs are going to go down. The average costs are going to go down. And the reason they go down is because the company becomes more efficient. Right? They're doubling this and this, but they're more than doubling output. So as they become more efficient, their average costs will fall. So when you have the economies of scale, which are also known as increasing returns to scale. As the company gets bigger, the average costs go down. So the picture would look something like this, where we have company number 1, is at 4, average cost here, and 20. So the company that can produces 20 units is going to have an average cost of 4. The company that produces 80 units, I'll put them out here, they're going to have an average cost of 2. And I'm making an assumption here that, we're at the minimum point of the average cost curve, just to show you. But what would happen, who's going to win the fight between these two companies? Yeah, the one who can charge. Now, this company can charge, let's say, $3, and they're still going to make a profit. This company charges, if this company charges $3, what are they going to do? They can't compete, right? Because they're going to lose money if they charge $3, right? So the lower the average cost, the lower the price you can get away with. And in this industry, the larger companies are going to beat the smaller companies. So the larger companies are more efficient, and they end up dominating the industry. And again, they do it because their costs go up. Can you think of any industries that are dominated by big companies? Shouldn't be too hard.
Cable.
Huh?
Cable.
Cable, yeah. Anything else? Pretty much like every industry. The soda industry, who dominates? Pepsi and Coke control like 80% of the market. The cigarette industry, Philip Morris controls like 50% of the market. The airlines, right? We have all the airline companies, right? We have the majority of businesses in this country, big ones we hear about, the computer industries with the Apples and the Microsoft. There's just the bigger companies beat the smaller companies. The home products industry. What happened to all the little mom and pop stores that were hardware stores? They're gone. Why are they gone? Because they can't compete with Lowe's, they can't compete with Home Depot. And what about the smaller grocery stores? What happened to them? They're gone because they can't compete with, the Walmarts of the world and the other grocers. And so we have a lot of companies, a lot of industries that are dominated by the big companies. And when that happens, that's called economies of scale. And it happens naturally. It happens because the bigger ones are more efficient than the smaller ones. It doesn't happen because the government says, I want big companies to dominate this industry. It happens because they're just more efficient. Okay? The next one. Yeah, that. And let's put this at 30. Our costs are always going to be 160 because we're still buying capital labor in the same amounts. And in this case, our average costs are going to be 160 divided by 30. So our average costs are going to be 5.33. So when the company gets bigger, what happens to their average cost? They go up. So in this case, this is called decreasing returns to scale. And when you have decreasing returns, you have increasing costs. When you have increasing returns, you have decreasing costs. And when you have constant returns, you have constant costs. So in this case, what do you think the picture is going to look like? Yeah, so the first one is going to be, let's say, a 4 again. So our average cost for a first small company is 4, and then they produce 20. And then we have something like this for a larger company, and their costs are going to be 533 in this case. So what happens is the bigger companies can't compete with the little companies. So can you think of any industry where the little companies dominate? That's just so funny. You know what you do, and I guess in the old days when they had phone books, right? You look at a phone book and see where there's the most companies. What would be the most companies in the phone? Lawyers, attorneys. You start looking for attorneys and it's like page after page after page. Physician, page after page after page. And that happens because it's more efficient for them to have smaller companies. I mean, what if you went to a doctor's office and it was like the size of Walmart? You know, you just walked in and it'd be like, 20,000 square feet, and they're just doctors, and they'd have these little cubicles, and why would that be a good thing for you? I mean, what's the reason that doctors, really have small offices is because the more efficient people like that. They like to have a personal relationship with the doctor. They don't want to have number 1,120. Oh, that's me. And then you go see some doctor who you've never seen before, right? And that wouldn't work. Right? So we end up, and it wouldn't work for a lot of reasons. Okay, it'd probably be a little bit out of control on their end. So what we end up happening is doctors' offices that are typically greater than one because one's not efficient, because you have to hire all these people, like insurance people, and the people who do all the paperwork, the people who set up the appointments, and one doctor would rather split that cost with a couple other doctors. So ideally, you're going to have maybe a few doctors in there, but you're not going to have a quarter. And same thing with law offices. You typically get like smaller offices that survive. So in each of these cases, the returns to scale give us an idea of the market structure. So the market structure is basically, what type of business is going to dominate? Well, in this industry, any size business can dominate or can compete. In this industry where there's increasing returns to scale, we're going to have a couple big companies that win. And in this one where there's decreasing returns to scale, we're going to have a lot of little companies that compete against each other. So this will probably be a little bit more competitive, right? This one will be a little less competitive. This one's probably pretty competitive. So looking at the cost and the returns to scale give us an idea of the market that the company's going to be in, which leads me to writing assignment number 3. So that's what you're going to have over the break. You're going to have to do writing assignment number 3. And what you're going to do in that one is you're going to use the market structures matrix that's on the web page. And you're going to pick a company, and then you're going to try to figure out what type of market structure it's going to be in. And so you start by maybe looking at the returns to scale. Like are the bigger companies dominating or little companies dominating? Okay, and so you have to write a couple pages. I'll write the instructions to you and send them to you, but they're already on Blackboard. So you go into writing assignments on Blackboard and get writing assignment number 3, or I'll email it to you specifically. The other thing about writing assignment number 3 is if you want to write like 2 pages, then you'll be done with your writing assignments. Okay, because your writing assignments are, you only have to do 4. So if you want to do an extra work on number 3, then you don't have to do 4. Right? Or if you missed number 2, you could write 1 on number 3. Right? Anyway, you can make up some work on number 3. Just write a couple pages because there's plenty to write. Okay, so I'll send you that, and I think this is it for the new material. Okay, that's all I have for new material. So, are there any questions about this before we start going on the exam? Zero. 2. Okay, and then the MPL is here, and the APL is here, and TC is given, and AC. And you can put in, there's going to be an marginal product capital question too. But here's what I did, okay? I took these questions here, see, from 1 to 8. Actually, for some reason, I cut and pasted these directly from the test. So where you say 1 through 8, is from the test. The only thing I did for some reason, I deleted the first question, which is what's the rental cost of capital? So you could write that in. Okay, so write in what is the rental cost of capital? So that's really sort of like the 1A and anyway. This ends up being like 9 questions, not 8. Here's the, but what I want you to do is let's go through these, all right? So the first question is that yes. Actually, I don't. I'll give you this in my you can just look on. I have some in my office. Actually, just printed some outside my office. If you don't get one now, just grab it on the way out of here. But question number 1: what is the rental cost of capital? It's not on there, but you have to use that formula. That's the TC plus WL plus RK1. But rental cost of capital, you need this here. And then the other one was 174. So what would be the rental cost of capital? What is it? Everybody should know this. So the total cost is 160. All right, so look across this first line, first row. And what information do you have in that first row? You have how much capital are you buying? 8. And how much does it cost? So what would be, how much is each unit then? 20. Okay? If you don't get that, you're going to miss all the rest of the questions. So please tell me that you have that. So I don't want you to get it wrong on this. It's the same formula that we used before. It's still the TC equals WL plus RK, but this is 0, this is 160, and this is 8. So it's R times 8 equals 160. So R has to equal 20. Okay, you get it? Good? Does everybody have that? Please say yes. Or tell me no. Let's say it. But, all right, so we're good with that. So that means that your R is equal to 20. What would be your W in question number 1 there? 14. Good job. Said loud and proud. So how did we get that? What happened? Look at line number, or row number 2. The only difference between row number 1 and row number 2, in terms of what we're purchasing, is we're buying 1 unit of labor. So you buy 1 unit of labor, and that changes by 14. That must mean that the labor costs $14. So your wage rate is 14. Number 3, what is the marginal product of the second worker? Marginal product of labor. What is it? So this one you can't do, right? This one is, what's the marginal product here? 23. What's the marginal product of the second worker? 22. So your answer is 22. You get that. It's the change. When they hired you, output changed by 22. You get that or not? Got it? All right. Number what? Number. Okay, so that one, the answer was 22. Right, the next one, what are the fixed costs when the company produces 45 units? Fixed costs are fixed, right? So the fixed costs are always going to be whatever they were at the beginning. And fixed costs are the costs that are incurred even when output is 0, you still have these costs. So what would that be? It is the cost of capital, same thing, but what are your costs when output equals 0? 160. So if we had a column in here for fixed costs, we'd say they equal 160 and variable costs would equal 0, right? And then these are 160, they're fixed. Fixed costs are fixed, right? So fixed costs are equal to 160. Number 4, what's the average product of labor when they employ 2 units? 22.5. 22.5. Look at this one here. It's just Q over L. That's all it is. Q over L. So that's 22.5. This divided by 45 divided by 2. Okay, here's the tough question. Give me information from the table about what type of returns to scale is the company exhibiting.
Increasing.
Guess it's not that tough. All right, good. So what happened here is there's only one place on this whole chart here where you can see if capital and labor are doubling. There's only one place where capital and labor double. It goes from 8 to 16 and 2 to 4. So if this is doubling, what's happening to output? And it goes up by more than double. So if this was equal to 90, for instance, then that goes up by 45, that goes up by 90. To 90, then it would be constant returns. Anything above 90 is going to be increasing returns. Anything below 90 will be decreasing. Okay, so capital double, labor double, output more than double. So there must be increasing returns. Number 6, you just have to, I'm not going to be able to solve for it here, but it's the lowest price for this company to charge is the minimum average cost. Whatever that might be. I'm not going to fill in the average cost column here, but if you solve and just got your minimum average cost, let's just say, your average cost was $2.20 here and all the other numbers were higher, then your answer would be $2.20. Okay? So you solve for your average cost, and you'll do this on the test, and then once you get the average cost, then then you find the lowest number, and then that's your lowest price that they can charge is right here. And the quantity associated with that number, in this case, would be 92, and that's the next question. Okay, so the next question is, what's the most efficient level of output this company can produce? And the answer would be whatever the quantity is at that average, lowest average cost. And this is all explained in the answers that I sent to you, or that are on my webpage. Okay, there's answers that are all posted up there. So you can reread that if you need. Okay, what's the marginal product of the 17 unit capital?
Plus 10.
10. Good. Everybody see it? Okay. All right. Here are the questions from today's class. If a firm increases their capital by 60%, their labor by 60%, and output increases by 60%, it can be said that the firm is exhibiting what? Constant returns. Constant returns. Right. Holding everything else constant, if a firm is exhibiting increasing returns to scale, then their average costs are what? Doing what? As the bank gets bigger. If they're increasing returns, what happens to cost? Falling. Falling. So B is the answer there. Generally speaking, if returns to scale are constant, the industry would be dominated by any size firm. Okay, so what you'll get on the test, or probably some of you will get a question that says, generally speaking, if returns to scale are increasing, all right, or something like that, then the industry would be dominated by bigger firms, and if it was decreasing, it would be smaller firms. So what I did again, because I didn't, just being honest with you, right before class, I thought I need to make sure returns to scale questions from the test are that you guys see them. I cut and pasted these from my test, okay? And I just changed, the numbers. But basically, these are the questions that you're going to have on the test. These are all the returns to scale questions that you're going to have on the test, or right here. So, all right, let's take a quick look at your quizzes and see. I know some people didn't do well on the quizzes, so if you have questions about that, I can